Germany's foreign minister says that Turkey must comply with the terms of the 2016 migration deal that calls for it to stop migrants from crossing from its territory into the EU. This comes after Turkey deployed special forces to block the return of any migrants who've illegally entered the EU. Greek police have been forcing such migrants back into Turkey after they break through the country's border defenses.
Faces of despair. Thousands of refugees have gathered on the border, the focus on the Turkish town of Edirne. Many are forced to camp out in the open. Some of these people have been displaced by the long-running conflict in Syria.
In Europe, you can work, there are jobs, you get a decent salary, the kids can go to school. You can lead a normal human life. That's all I want.
I made it to the Greek side, then they took my phone, my money, they took my clothes off, they beat me and sent me back to Turkey. This is just wrong.
We want to be able to breathe freely. When I was 12 years old, I had to leave school. My parents were killed in the war.
Others have come from Afghanistan and Pakistan. They find shelter where they can, dozens crammed into this abandoned bus station. Turkey's president has carried out his threat to open the border to Europe if NATO did not back his military operation in northern Syria. The Red Crescent and Red Cross are helping out where they can on the ground, handing out food and water and providing basic shelter.
We are ready to do whatever is needed to restore dignity, because what we are missing in this moment is the dignity for the human beings that are in the middle of this political game. We are ready to do whatever is necessary to provide dignity to those that are stuck at this moment in the no man's land.
Ankara, for its part, is determined that those who do make it across to Greece will not be sent back into Turkish territory.
1,000 special forces officers are being deployed to the river on the border, fully equipped to prevent people being pushed back.
Greece is equally determined to prevent a flood of new arrivals. The authorities say some 35,000 migrants have tried to cross illegally into Greek territory in the past week. Athens insists those who reach its soil will be deported.
Let's get the very latest now with DW's Yulia Han. She joins us now from the Turkish side of that border. Good day to you, Yulia. Can you fill us in? What's the situation at the border where you are this morning?
Well, the situation here appears to remain tense. Now, as journalists, we are not allowed to get anywhere near the border or this main border crossing here between Turkey and Greece anymore. Police are stopping us right here about 2 kilometers away. But a little earlier, we managed to get a little closer with our car because we were before we were again stopped by the gendarme here. And we managed to talk to some migrants and refugees who told us that tear gas had been fired again. We could also smell the tear gas, and it's right now not entirely clear if this was just being fired from the Greek side towards Turkey. There are also reports that tear gas had been fired from the Turkish side. It's not entirely clear what role Turkish military there is playing. There are some reports saying that or suggesting that the soldiers there are kind of encouraging the refugees or migrants maybe to use violence in order to demand passage to Europe. The people we talked to also told us that although they have some access to food and drinks, the temperatures here are particularly difficult. They have to sleep on, plastic covers during the night, and they also told us there are still thousands waiting there, waiting to cross into the European Union. But as I said, it's very difficult to get an independent understanding of the situation. But from what we understand, it remains tense.
Okay, it's tense, and also we've been reporting this morning on groups of refugees who've been moved around at the border area, Yulia. Is there any idea as to why these groups of refugees have been moved on and where they've gone to?
Well, I can tell you about I can tell you about one group. We've been filming with them last evening. They had kind of built up a makeshift camp in the town of Edirne, very near to where we are right now. About 200 people, many families with small children, people from Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan. These people told us, we are determined to stay. We will wait for Greece to open the borders. And when we arrived at the same location earlier today again, it was suddenly emptied. All the people had been moved somewhere else. That's our understanding, because I talked to one police officer who told me, yes, we took the people in buses to this area, to this main border crossing. So it appears Turkish authorities are somehow facilitating people's move and directing what's going on here at the border.
And just a few moments ago, Yulia, we looked at what looked like a blacked out bus moving just behind you there at the border, where there's a lot of activity behind you this morning. Yulia Hahn, thanks so much for being with us for now. Well, the EU is concerned that the fighting in Syria will create new flows of refugees heading for Europe, and EU foreign ministers are meeting in the Croatian capital Zagreb today to discuss those developments. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell is backing a Dutch plan for a buffer zone to stop attacks on civilians in rebel-held Idlib province. But he says the bloc has no power to enforce the measure. The German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas is also supporting security guarantees for civilians in the region. Greece's foreign minister is expected to press his counterparts for their help in coping with the latest arrival of migrants at the Greek border. Our EU correspondent, Georg Mathis, is following that meeting of foreign ministers for us. Good morning to you, Georg. What's the EU prepared to do to help Greece cope with another potential migrant crisis unfolding at this hour on its border?
Apart from financial aid to help with the refugees that are already in the country, Brian, there is now also a force of 100 border officers from Frontex, the EU's border agency, on their way to Greece, supposed to arrive next week in order to guard the potentially difficult parts where Greece borders Turkey with boats, but also with personnel on the ground, so support for Greece. But what is really essential here is the message from foreign ministers in Zagreb that they do support that Greece really fends off illegal migrants from crossing, that it is a stronghold on the external borders of the EU.
Georg, we're going to take a look right now at a root cause of this crisis, the deteriorating situation in Syria. Fighting in Idlib province has created
For 6 hours, talks continued. Then Erdogan and Putin stepped out in front of the cameras to announce a security corridor, joint patrols, and above all, a ceasefire. Tonight at 12 a.m., that is midnight between the 5th and 6th of March, the ceasefire will take effect, and all steps will be taken to abide by it. The talks began at midday. There was little left of the friendly rapport that was apparent only days before. Erdogan and Putin look tense. The situation is complicated. Russia and Turkey are at loggerheads in the Syrian province of Idlib. There, Syrian leader Assad's troops are fighting rebels with support from Russia. The rebels are supported by Turkish troops. But Erdogan and Putin say they are committed to de-escalation. We hope this agreement will lay a foundation for the suspension of fighting in Idlib. We hope to end the suffering of civilians there and to avoid a greater humanitarian crisis. It was the outcome of hours-long difficult negotiations. Now the ceasefire will face its big test, if and how long it can hold.
Georg, this looks like a key ceasefire. How important do EU foreign ministers meeting there in Zagreb think the ceasefire is in helping reduce the flow of migrants heading towards the EU's external border?
All foreign ministers I heard here on the second day of their meeting welcomed the idea, made, however, clear that it's, of course, necessary that this is a sustainable ceasefire, and they have to look at the details, how it actually works out throughout the course of the week, and to what extent it will then deliver easing of the humanitarian suffering you see in Syria. And that is why there's also financial aid, extra 170 million now on the table to aid people in Syria, 60 million directly in the region of Idlib. And the Dutch foreign minister arrived here this morning saying the buffer zone is a good idea. He likes the ceasefire, but it will also take a no-fly zone. Now, a number of foreign ministers like that idea too, but of course it is something that has to be channeled via the United Nations. You need a resolution for that, and for that you need Russia on board. So it's a complicated scenario where the EU really has no other say but put some moral pressure on the table or some ideas like that no-fly zone.
Turkey has already been very specific. It says it wants the EU to offer it more political support, more financial support. Is it likely to get those things?
A German foreign minister, Heiko Maas, here in Zagreb ruled out that there will be any direct payment to Turkey. It's a bit unclear whether Turkish aid organizations within the deal that the EU has made in order to help Turkey deal with some 4 million refugees that are in the country, so billions have been flowing from Brussels to Turkey, whether more money will come that way. But what is clear is that all foreign ministers made clear here there will be no blackmail, there will be no using of refugees as bargaining chips in order to force Europe to spend more money.
Some very clear signals from Zagreb. Georg, thanks so much for that.